Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Yep, people coming in. Look at this. It's a party now. People coming in. Welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday. Y'all literally could have been anywhere else in the world, but you are here with us tonight. So this is our October community meetup. And we have a great time planned for you all tonight. So for folks that don't know who I am, my name is Kelly McGowan. I'm the founder and executive director of Transform 314. And our organization, for folks that aren't aware, because there are a couple new faces in the room, but for folks that aren't aware, Transform 314, we're an organization that's really looking to bridge the disconnect between Black St. Louisans and local government to drive local level policy change to make sure that we have thriving communities, which means we have awesome built environments. And that's our lane. So real quick, show of hands. Folks that have heard the term built environments. If you've heard this term, yeah. Okay, well, I know he knows. So that's our lane, is really focusing on how we can bring about equitable built environments in our region, because that positively impacts health outcomes. And our lane is local government, because local government really impacts that. So that's what we do. Now, as far as what to expect for this evening, I welcomed y'all. I introduced y'all. Something else we're gonna do, because I like for us to just briefly go around the room so everyone just knows who's in the space and who's in the room and we're in community with this evening. So I'll kind of go around for folks to briefly introduce themselves. I'll also do a really quick review of the purpose of our meetups, because we do have like a couple new faces in the room, just so we're all on the same page, as well as our house rules. The meat and potatoes of our time together, we know November is an important election. And in particular, we have some local level matters to consider, which are propositions. So we're gonna have a conversation about that. We have a special guest in the building that will shed some light on one in particular, and we'll kind of talk about a couple of the other ones, as well as share information about ways that folks can learn more about it. And there's also an upcoming event next week, a panel for folks to also engage. So we'll share that information. We'll also talk a little bit about what we're going to do in 2025. And then, yeah, I have like one call to action for folks, and then some announcements at the end. So, sound good? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, because it's time. I'm talking too much. People give me that look. I know people give me that look. But anyway, we're gonna go around real quick. If everyone could tell us your name and also what ward and our neighborhood you live in. If you are a city resident, if you are a county resident, no worries. We love our county folks too. So feel free to represent what municipality you live in too. So model, I'll go first. So I'm Kelly McGowan. I live in the 9th Ward in the Central West neighborhood. I'm gonna pass it off.
Hello, I'm Janessa Bailey. I also live in Ward 9 in the Central West End neighborhood.
Hello, Jasmine, and I live in
Smith, 8th Ward, in Greenville neighborhood, Black Unit 1902, Area D.
Okay.
James Springfield, level 4, I think. Interested in hearing all the stuff Kelly has to say.
Hi, y'all.
Everybody was on Perkins, I live in Ward 12. My name is Bill, I live in
We're gonna head over here first.
Hi, my name is Amina Fox. I also live in 14.
Donovan, Ward 5.
I live in Ward 9 and Ward 6.
Hi, Michael Browning, and the Alderman for Ward 9.
Hi, I'm Jan, and I live in Benton Park, Ward 8.
Charles Wesley, downtown, Ward 8.
Well, thank you all for entertaining me with that exercise. I like to do that just so we all know who's in the space, and also I just think it's encouraging because we're all from different parts of the city, we're all from different neighborhoods, and we are here coming together to see our better city. So I think that's really encouraging for folks to know that people do care. That's why we're here. So speaking of why we're here, what's the purpose of our meetup? So again, for the new folks in the space, that have not been here. So this is the purpose of our meetup. So one, to connect and build with fellow St. Louisans, which we are, that's looking to improve our city. Number two, to share information and legislative updates regarding all things that impact our streets and other aspects of our built environments. Number three, it serves as a space for everybody, right? So residents, business owners, folks that are part of nonprofits, our decision makers. So we convene everyone because it's going to take all of us to bring about the changes that we want to see. So this is a productive and solutions-oriented space. I will repeat, this is a productive and solutions-oriented space. Okay, cool. And then lastly, we come together to develop and implement advocacy efforts that we want to see resulting in improving our streets. Whether that's through policies, whether that's through procedures, whatever it is, that's what we want to do. Is we want to see our streets be better, be safer, be less jacked up. Am I right? Thank you. All right. So our house rules, so we're all on the same page. We got 6. So one, just ask that one person we got time so everyone can hear what folks have to say. Obviously, we have a mic in the building, and also our special guests, because we are live, y'all. We are live. So our special guests will come up here, speak as we're streaming. So that might limit it, but just ask that again, if you have thoughts or questions, just make sure we do it one at a time so we can all hear. Also, please be considerate of and respect differences of opinion, because those differences, that's really where the solutions lie. So ask about that. Number 3, we follow Vegas rules here, which means that personal stories and government names stay here, but the lessons and the learning leave here, and that's what we use, will use to apply to bring about the changes that we want to see. Number 4, we're gonna give everybody their time. Okay. So if someone's doing too much, I will do the wrap it up sign. Okay. And just ask again politely because we want to make sure everyone's voices and perspectives are heard. Number 5, we will have a parking lot, and this is a space where folks like to stream fellows, we always ask for questions. So if I may not know the answer to it, I will rely on the collective wisdom and knowledge in the space to see if folks have an answer. If we can't come up with an answer, I'll do my due diligence to follow up. Put it on the parking lot this evening, and then I'll share the information in our next week. And lastly, but thirdly not least, people do not have to be knowledgeable of local government to participate. So those are our rules. And I'm done talking because we're gonna get, this is what y'all came for. Y'all didn't come to hear me talk. Y'all came in here, we're gonna get into the November general election. We know it is a long ballot, okay, for the city. It is long. But a lot of important things, and one of the most important things to me is all the way at the end of the ballot. So that's our highlight this evening. We are gonna talk about the propositions that we will have to decide we'll be voting on in November. So there are 4. And so the first one is Proposition T. So I am going to shut up and I'm going to turn it over to my Alderman Browning. So come on up, please. Come on up, Ward, please.
Thank you, Kelly, and it's good to see everyone here. I am excited to be here with you this evening to share more about Proposition T, which is going to be, as Kelly mentioned, on your ballot, all the way on the very last page. So make sure you stick around for the whole thing because there's some really important stuff there at the end. Make sure you give yourself enough time to vote because we all know it's tough to take time out of the day, maybe go early in the morning, late at night, whatever you need. But make sure you make it to that page because those are the things that are going to affect your life the most here in the city. So Proposition T, what is that? It would create St. Louis's first Department of Transportation. I think you're probably wondering, don't we already have one of those? Who takes care of our roads? Well, I have to go all the way back to 1914 to answer that question. 1914 is when our charter, our current charter was written. And they made room for a streets division at the time, the same language that currently governs our street department today. And that language primarily provided for the maintenance of our streets. Now, when I talk about the maintenance of our streets, you might be wondering, what did streets look like in 1914? Well, they weren't like today, as you might imagine. The common mode of transportation were horses and buggies. The most popular car at the time was the Model T, which you probably know didn't go very fast, top speed of 40 miles per hour. And the language that exists in our charter currently even has outdated passages like this department is responsible for the sprinkling of streets. And I'm not talking about salt in the winter. It's actually water so the streets wouldn't be so dusty because, again, they were made out of dirt. So the streets have changed a lot in the past 110 years, and yet the language that governs our streets department has not. It still primarily refers to maintenance, and it has nothing to do with your safety on the road. In fact, there is no department at the city of St. Louis that is looking out for your safety on our roads. And as you might imagine, language that is 110 years old, even though the car had just started to exist, hasn't done much to protect people who get around by other modes of transportation in our city, whether it's by walking or a bicycle or those little electric scooters you see places. I don't know, do they call them hoverboards? Those single wheel things that you see people wear. Like, those are fun, but we want those people to be safe too, right? So we are looking at how do we transition our streets department into something that can accommodate all modes of travel, can really focus on the safety of our city. So that's where Proposition T comes in. Proposition T will do one thing in particular. It will transition the streets department into a Department of Transportation over a period of 4.5 years, an effective date of July 1st, 2029. In doing that, it will change the mission of the department to accommodate all road users and put planning into the description. And you might be wondering, why do we need planning in the department? Don't we have planning in the department right now? Again, no. Does anyone, I'm sure you've covered this in past meetings because I've seen Kelly speak about it. Does anyone know how we currently decide which streets get paved in the city? I know Craig knows. Craig, why don't you tell us?
Basically, for the most part, unless it's capital committee, it's through the board of aldermen.
Right, so your alderman decides, which sounds a little messed up. It's a political thing, but it also means that we're riding around in a truck with someone from streets being like, yeah, this one's pretty bad, we should pave it, which that kind of works. But now that we're moving to larger wards, now that we have more roads in our wards, and we have a limited amount of money to take care of it, what you're seeing is increasingly roads that cannot be taken care of, which leads to the oft-mentioned jacked up streets. The lack of planning in our street department also means that they're not looking at where are the most dangerous places in our city, where are people getting hurt. And if you map it out, what you'll see is not surprising. Where people get hurt in our city, on our streets, very closely maps with every other map you see of St. Louis when it comes to the disinvestment and, frankly, the racist policies that we've seen in our city that have created entire swaths of our city that have all the statistics that go along with that. The places where people make less money, the places where people have lower education, the places where people are the least safe on our streets. So if we don't have a department that's looking out for where people are getting hurt, we're not getting money or labor invested in those parts of our streets to make them safer so that we're not losing lives in those places where people are already struggling to survive. So the Department of Transportation is the answer to that. This is something that our city has been doing, other cities have been doing around us, Nashville, Denver, Cape Girardeau. Not a big city, but they're ahead of us on this. And that is transitioning to a department that has a holistic way of looking at our streets and really focusing on how it can make them safer for every one of you. So what could a Department of Transportation do? It could properly implement our ADA transition plan. I know a lot of you probably know somebody who has mobility challenges. If you don't, you will be one day. We're all going to get old at some point. We all might have a mobility issue. Maybe it's a car accident, or maybe it's you stumbled and tripped and fell on our sidewalks, which I'll get to in a second. If you have a mobility issue in this city, it's hard to get around right now. Who here has seen someone in a wheelchair using the street instead of the sidewalk? Yeah, we've all seen it. That's a moral failing on the part of our city, and it's frankly time we change that. There should be no reason that we can't protect everybody in our city and how they get around. If we protect the most vulnerable among us, we will protect everybody in the process. Think about it. If someone in a wheelchair can use that intersection and get across safely, then you, an able-bodied person, might be able to do that too. So we will be able to take a citywide approach, look at where the most dangerous spots are, make sure we properly implement our ADA transition plan. We'll be able to do things like create a paving plan. I mentioned how your alderman currently decides what streets get paved. What that means is that we don't know what's going to get paved next year because we don't even know who your alderperson is going to be next year. So that leads to a lack of ability to coordinate with the utility companies. So I'm sure you don't have to go far if you go out this door to find a utility cut in the road. And you feel those cuts when you drive in your car, when you go over those metal plates that they stick down for months at a time. The utilities don't know what roads we're going to pave, which means that when we go to pave the roads, if they really need it, sometimes we'll have freshly paved it, and then here comes fire, they tear it back up again. That's money wasted, that's your taxpayer money wasted. So a DOT would be able to create a paving plan. There was a study, I think it was London, where they were looking at what was the single greatest customer experience improvement that they can make on their metro trains. And it wasn't more frequent trains or more trains. The single greatest improvement to customer experience they found was just little electronic boards that told you when the next train was coming. Just that knowledge helped people feel better about their transit system. Well, the goal here would be to have a paving plan that you could look up online and actually see, is my street due for paving? The utilities would be able to see that too, coordinate their work around it. The goal here would be for you to be able to look up and maybe even request online and say, hey, people are speeding on my street. It feels really dangerous. Can we get some traffic calming here? And instead of depending on your alderperson to go and pass a board bill to create a speed hum, which by the way, that's the most board bills we do. Most of the work that the Board of Aldermen does right now are speed humps and stop signs. That's the majority of our board bills. So we would be able to serve you better too by not having politicians involved in your streets and making them safer. This is bringing the hands of the experts, putting this into a place where we can actually focus on the areas of our city that are the most dangerous. The last thing that I once said I would focus on here is sidewalks. Sidewalks are part of how we get around. Even if you drive everywhere, you have to get out of your car and jump onto the sidewalk and finally get to your destination. And I think we have all seen the sidewalks in our city and what a disgrace they are. So that should be part of the transition plan as well. How do we get better sidewalks? How do we make sure that instead of doing address here, address there, depending on the homeowner to pay half, which often they can't afford, or maybe they don't even live in town, so they're not going to do. What if instead we did entire blocks at a time, made sure that there were accessible ramps on every spot that needed to be? What if instead the city took full responsibility for its property, the sidewalks, and made sure that they were in good condition so that you could travel across the city? Well, that's what we could do with the Department of Transportation. That's what we could do with planning that will be in this department's description if you vote yes on November 5th to pass Proposition T. So I put a lot in front of you tonight, but I really think the two takeaways are this, that a Department of Transportation will be able to combine what is right now a fractured system across our city into a singular department that is focused on making our roads safer for all road users. And the other thing that the Department of Transportation would do is add planning into the department that would actually be able to get ahead, be proactive on our streets, and really focus on making them safer for you all, and adding an element of predictability that will help everybody do better. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you have. I already see one in the back there.
Does this include alleys? I mean, I know we have to drive through alleys, you know, I mean, like it's a street, but we still, a lot of us get into our homes and our garages and alleys.
Yeah, so alleys are kind of an afterthought right now under the current system, just because having to use Ward Capital or St. Louis Works money, which are the two sources that currently pave your streets, they're so limited in amount that we end up, doing them on the streets that people drive on, and the alleys rarely get done. This, eventually, the goal would be to get it to a place where your alley could be also evaluated along with the rest of the pavement in the city. It's a city responsibility, and it should be that way. Initially, though, we're going to have to transition to this slowly. You don't change 110 years of doing something the same way overnight. And so that's why we have this transition period built in, so we can actually make the transition. I'm not interested in passing something and then getting a pat on the back and saying, yeah, you changed some wording around. I'm interested in an actual difference out on our streets. So we're going to take it slow, and we're going to try to build capacity, because right now our streets department, as you may have heard if you were at a meetup a couple months ago, I think you had Director Williams here. She talked a lot about staffing issues. That will be true even with the change. So we're going to, as part of this transition, look at how do we build their capacity? How do we evaluate employee salaries to make sure they're getting paid a fair wage, that we can attract good talent? That's all part of this. We want to really make sure this department actually makes a difference out on the streets. So to answer your question about alleys, I think not initially. I think initially this would still be covered by Ward Capital. But what we are talking about is consolidating funding sources. And this is where I'll mention that voting yes for Prop T does not cost you any extra money. This is going to reallocate current funding sources that are split between 14 different wards. And it's going to allocate them towards the common purpose of taking care of our transportation network in the city. So we're not looking to cost the taxpayer any more money, but simply just use our money more efficiently. And on that note, we'll also be able to apply for grants more efficiently. Right now, it takes 5 to 7 years for a project to get done. 5 to 7 years. That's 2 elections in your county. So in that time, you could lose your alderperson. Maybe you like them a lot, maybe you don't, but either way, they could either get unelected, or they could decide to retire, or they could just, not care about streets at all. And that money will get reallocated and not spent where it needs to get spent. So putting this money in the hands of a Department of Transportation will allow us to do matches for federal grants, really, take that small amount of money we have and make it a bigger amount of money so that we can do bigger projects and do them in a faster manner. And eventually, yes, I'd love for them to be responsible for every single paved surface in the city that isn't private property. But I think what we'll do is start out with and look at having the new Department of Transportation handle arterials, collectors first, and then move on to neighborhood streets as they are able to build capacity. Yes, Craig.
So I really like the forward-looking, proactive approach that you have. And you may not be able to fully answer this because you don't have a crystal ball, but you probably do have a sense of how this is going to play out. So when we looked at the legislation, or looked at what the proposition is, it doesn't say all the things yet that you're talking about. So how do you see that playing out? It changes this into having the Department of Transportation, but what will have to happen after that to be able to get all those things?
That's a great question, and that's covered on the road ahead portion of that handout that you all have. So that blue square where it says, the road ahead, what we're talking about is what the Proposition T does is the charter change, right? It changes the language in our charter. To write a good charter, you do not get super specific in the charter, because the charter is very difficult to change. It requires 60% of your vote. That's what's going to take on this ballot. 60% of people approving this measure. But what you do is you leave it a little bit vague, and then you structure the rest out by ordinance, which is a lot easier to change because you just need to pass it to the Board of Aldermen. With the Proposition T passing. The plan is to follow that up with a series of ordinances, the first of which would be establishing a planning division within the Department of Transportation, that crucial planning division, which would be able to create things like utility coordination, the paving plan, ADA plans, properly implement the TMP, which I think you probably heard about from the mayor's office. TMP is great, y'all. I'm really excited about it, but it's just a plan at the end of the day. Without implementation, it will remain just a plan. So that's why a planning division is essential for the Department of Transportation to work. And right now, you can't put that in there without the language in the charter putting planning in the department's description. So this proposition really opens the door and creates the framework for that change, but then we have to do the real work. And I'm committed to doing that. You know, I'm up for re-election this coming year, and I plan to continue to serve because I think that there are important ordinances that we need to change. The most important of which is ending or at least tapering down the ward capital system that has served us so poorly since the 90s. Dividing our money up into 14 different pots, like I mentioned, you know, it just fragments our whole city, creates incomplete networks, or wards that I'm sure some of you live in where your alderperson doesn't spend any money at all on streets. I'm not going to name names, but I think you know if you live in that ward. So it's really frustrating. I think that, you know, you shouldn't have to depend on a politician to care whether or not you're safe on your street. That should be the standard practice of the department. And that's what that language puts in the charter if you pass Proposition T. The other things we'll pass, obviously, I said, you know, planning division, there is the reallocation of funding. So it's going to be important if you vote for Prop T to keep pressure up on your alderperson to vote for these coming changes. My hope is that this passes with an overwhelming amount, because I want to be able to take it to my colleagues and say, look, people believe in this. People want to be safer. You need to follow through. But it's going to be hard. Alder people have been attached to these little pots of money that we get for far too long. But there is a change. Proposition T, when it passed the Board of Aldermen, passed 14-1. That means that only one person dissented. And again, if you live in that ward, you know. But 14-1. So the Alder people believe in this. They're tired of making these decisions too. So we're going to pass the future ordinances. The last two I'll mention is that there will be an ordinance that will coordinate with utilities. We actually have that introduced right now with Board Bill 104, but we're working on the language to get it just right so that we can coordinate with the utilities. We're sitting down with each utility right now so that we make sure we get them all. And believe me, it's hard work. They all operate differently, but again, a lot of what we're hearing from them is we can't coordinate with you if you don't have a paving plan. So that's why it's important to centralize the funding and start creating that paving plan. And then the last ordinance that I think would be really great to pass to bolster this department is replacing our 50/50 sidewalk program. As I mentioned, it doesn't work. First of all, most of the damage to our sidewalks are from city trees that were probably improperly planted. We've learned a lot about planting the right size tree in the tree lawns. But if you have Bradford pears in your neighborhood, you know what I'm talking about. They stink and they're really brittle. We're trying to do better by that. But right now, those sidewalks can be in such bad condition that, yes, people in wheelchairs have to use the street, which is so dangerous for them. So replacing the 50/50 sidewalk program with a program that would cover all the sidewalks, create complete liability on the city instead of homeowners, and create complete networks so that people can get around safely. So there's a lot of work to be done, and that's why we don't just need your vote on November. We need your continuing support as we try to get all these passed. Yes.
Okay, I hear you saying that the department is going to be over the streets, but how is, if it's not going to cost the citizens any more money, where is the money going to come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as I said, there's two taxes right now that you currently pay. There's St. Louis Works and there's Ward Capital. Those both come from taxes that I think are sales taxes, and a small portion gets put into an account that then gets split 14 different ways throughout the ward. So we'd be asking first that St. Louis Works money, which only gets spent on streets and sidewalks right now, that all goes over to this new department in order to start creating paving plan. The second step of that would be to take the portion of ward capital that we spend on streets every year and moving that over to this new department so that they can make traffic calming improvements, so that they can, do the planning necessary and all that other stuff. So it really is just reallocating money that currently exists in lots of fragmented pots and putting them towards this department to let the experts make the decisions. And if you're wondering, well, how can I trust, I don't know, the street department is a little bit understaffed right now. How can I trust they're going to get this stuff? The Board of Aldermen will still have oversight over all of this. So the plan would be to build into the ordinance that, requires a paving plan, that the new Department of Transportation comes to the board maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, and gives the board updates on what streets they paved, which streets they didn't get to, why they didn't get to them, creating some accountability within the system. So that way we can say, okay, well, what do you need to get it paved? Do you need more money? Do you need more people? And actually create more of a responsive system so that we can make sure that we're actually getting to the work that needs to be gotten to. Can you believe it? There was a street in the 9th Ward. Its name is Donovan. It had not been paved in decades. You needed a four-wheeler to get up and down this street. It looked so bad. When I was elected, I got it paved immediately. And I had a resident who lived there tell me that he went to his mother's grave and say, "Mom, they paved Donovan," which just broke my heart, right? Because I was like, that shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have to wait your entire life to get your street paved. So yes, the paving plan will make sure that we're getting to every corner of the city, that we're not neglecting parts of the city that, for decades, and that we are really, really making sure that we're addressing the most, the worst conditioned places first, because you shouldn't have to live on a street that you can't drive down without damaging your car. In the back, Charles?
Right. So, I'm not going to ask a question, but I'm going to for the person to speak briefly, if they want to, about how the Department of Transportation for other cities have involved. If Dawn is willing to do that, then to me, she's really the next this process. So, Dawn, you're willing to talk a little bit about you did fabulous research paper, the violence. So, if you do.
Our people want to know, right? See what's up. So come on. Oh no.
It's a little bit of a maze.
I know.
Hi, everyone. Like I said earlier, my name is Dawn Walter. What Charles was talking about is I was a volunteer with the Community Mobility Committee, which is currently changing, maybe going through some updates or anything. But as a volunteer, when I was studying urban and regional planning, I told the committee, hey, I really think this charter change could be a moment for us to address transportation. So as Charles hinted, I wrote a 10, 11 page paper that analyzed how our system could be improved based on how systems have improved in other places, particularly Kansas City, Denver, Baltimore, just looking at cities that either have done very interesting things or are very similar to us. And the greatest difference that I saw was, since we have not updated our charter for 100+ years, a lack of sidewalk mention, and nowhere in our charter did it mention bike lanes. And it was also very specific to streets and had a very engineering mindset, which, like I said, as the planner, I love me some engineers, but they tend to do it based on the book, what the book says, and there isn't a lot of planning or holistic approach citywide. And so that was the greatest thing. I think in terms of what another interesting city has done, the city of Denver went through this process in 2018, 2019. And they made the shift from a Department of Streets, or I forget what they called it exactly, to a Department of Transportation. And since they've been able to take a more holistic approach to their transportation planning, they have been able to lay down 123 miles of bike lanes. I know not everyone is a fan of bike lanes, but the ability to put that much infrastructure in quickly with smart planning behind it is just a testament of like what we could possibly bring to our city, either through street paving or sidewalk improvements. I'm happy to answer any questions, if anyone, or hand the mic back to Alderman Browning if people have questions.
Okay, there's quite a bit of different proposals and different projects that's gonna take place. So who's gonna be helping making those different projects come together instead of A is doing A, B is doing B? How is, I mean, that's all you hear. Everybody's got something going on, but how is that gonna come together?
So you can explain this as well, but what I saw was that right now in the city, if a project needs to go through, it has to go through the Board of Public Service, then to planning, then to the Department of Streets, and through a couple other departments. So as Alderman Browning said, it's very fragmented right now. So the hope with what my research paper, and I think what they've done a great job with this charter change, is the idea that we will pull all the different aspects into one department, so it's not switching between departments and being slowed down or stopped or for whatever reason, but I will hand my back.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That there are at least 3 up to 5 different departments that touch our streets right now. The other 2 that need to be mentioned are the Office of the Disabled, which looks out for our accessibility in our city, and the Sustainability Office. Increasingly, as climate change becomes more and more of an issue, and we continue to see storms that drop more and more water, believe it or not, we can actually design our streets to be better to handle that. Up in Dubuque, Iowa, where I went last year for a conference, they started using permeable pavers in their alleys so that there's not so much water displacement. I don't know about you, but my alley turns into a small river every time it rains. So that will help improve our infrastructure in a lot of ways too. But if all those different departments have to weigh in on projects, not only does it take a long time and requires a lot of coordination, but it also just lengthens that timeline to a point where we are not getting these done in a way that actually makes you safer faster. I also, before I forget, this proposition wouldn't be on the ballot if it weren't for the work of TrailNet. The people at TrailNet have been advocating for this idea for a long time. They organized people to come out and testify at the Charter Commission. They got people to come out and support it at the Board of Aldermen. I would not have been able to get that passed with my colleagues if Charles hadn't been out there meeting with alders as well to advocate for this. So I want to make sure I mention that this has been a team effort. That advocates and groups that look out for our safety in our city, like TrailNet, are proponents of this because they've long seen what is obvious to most of us, that this fragmentation isn't serving us. So I just want to give a shout out there and really say appreciative of all the work they've done.
Is there a follow-up on something that Mr. Stringfellow talked about? I think, is there not another proposition on the ballot that would allow all the people to move money from one fund to another as opposed to now it goes through E&A, so that if there were priorities with regard to streets and in particular areas, Board of Aldermen could weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, that would be the idea, is that we would be able to prioritize certain things. Obviously, it shouldn't take your whole person becoming. Oh, yes, we're going to get to that, yeah. But obviously, there's an idea that you shouldn't need the help of your alderman to raise an issue in our city. We should have responsive city departments that serve you day in and day out, no matter who the politician is. But on the note of the different propositions on the ballot, I think what Craig is mentioning is Proposition B, which would allow the Board of Aldermen to have more budget power. And that is a direct result of, again, right now we cannot really take, for instance, our constituents' advice or needs and then put them in the budget. we have to depend on 3 elected officials who are citywide, the comptroller, the president of the board, and the mayor, who really make up the budget and then send it to us for approval. We can decrease things, but we can't increase things, which means that like we can just take money out of a category and then E&A will just put it right back in. So we don't really have a whole lot of control over the budget right now. If you pass Proposition B, the good news is you don't need to worry that we're going to get out of control. We still have to do a balanced budget and we cannot tap into the reserves. So we're not going to lower our credit rating. There was some misinformation about that earlier this year, but this is actually a proposition that would just give you more of a voice in our budget process. So we don't have Alderman Aldridge, who is the sponsor of that one, here tonight, but if he were here, that's what he would tell you, that this is about giving you more of a voice in the budget process.
Hold on for a second, hold on. So y'all, our food is finally here. I don't know if y'all been smelling that juicy goodness that came up in here. So we're gonna take a really quick break. Obviously, Alderman Brown, you'll still be around, right? Mm-hmm. So we're gonna take a really quick break so folks can get the food and we will reconvene. In the meantime, in between time, Alderman Browning will still be around. So if folks have any additional questions, obviously he's here. But this isn't like the it. So grab your food, come back to your seat because we have another special guest in the building to talk about another proposition. So thank you again, Alderman Browning, for being here. So we're around if you have questions, and that sheet is everything. I'm one of those people. I love it. I love it.
My contact info is on here, so if you think about it after you leave here tonight, please feel free to reach out.
So yeah. Get the food, y'all. Breakfast for dinner. And we will reconvene in a few minutes.
Me, that's why. About people who do it, I guess. That's well. I'm not. You know something.
Yes.
Look, I gotta explain.
Oh my gosh, right? Wow, you're in close contact with your alderman. I mean, it's just, it was just so, I felt just informed because it was just like so many things we talked about. Oh, let's take all of this. The greatest part about the way. Oh, we made it like so good. I know, and the only thing I could think about this entire time is, gosh, I hope the language on the ballot for those who haven't been informed is easy to understand that they'll say yes. Like, I hope that it's clear that like this isn't going to offer them anything, right? Like, I hope that that's in big. Like, we are already, like, the money are there, already taken out. We're just gonna make it. I understand the whole 2029 part. I don't love that. I'm like, that's way too much time to forget things. You're really gonna be committed to years. That's just kids. You know, I'm so it could help, but I'm not so streets.
All right, I know y'all are, it's quiet, so I guess the food must be good. Shout out to your catering. Breakfast dinner, you know, I love a good breakfast dinner, so, it's hidden. All right, So, I know y'all are chewing and enjoying the food. But we're gonna keep it moving. We touched on, Proposition T. Now we're gonna touch on another, proposition again. That would, again, if city voters came out and approved, again, this is something that would change our city charter. So, without further ado, we have in the building Alderwoman Daniela Velazquez, representing the sixth ward.
I
Okay.
have yet to figure out the right adjective. Sensational six.
Oh,
Stimulating gas, sugary seven.
excuse, oh, okay.
I'll take it, you know, guy brainstorming an adjectives. Time we leave here, if anybody wants to, good S word. Salacious, well, we probably don't want salacious. Salacious.
Hopefully expand the list.
Yeah, hopefully if I'm doing things right, we're not going for those. So I've got, can everybody hear me? I have Proposition B on the ballot. My joke is it's for vacancy, it's not for me, but it helps you remember not salacious, not for Velazquez, but for vacancy. And so I'm just gonna talk through it. I've got a little handout. So I know Alderman Browning was talking about Proposition T, and I'm happy to circle back to Proposition B for budget. My joke has been this is the alpha ballot, like puns, if you can't tell. But so this proposition is really trying to address vacancy. So as you all might know, the charter is our city's, basically the city's constitution. So this proposition might seem a little wonky, but we can't make changes to the city's, we need the people to change, to make any changes to the Constitution. So you might be like, well, why are we doing this? It seems like a legislative change. We can't make changes to the Constitution without you. So think about Proposition B. Currently, all the cap for fines and fees is in our charter and it's set at $500. That was put in there in 1970. So in today's money, that is about $4,000. So Proposition B is specifically asking you, the voters, to remove the cap for fines related to vacant and deteriorated non-owner occupied properties. That's a legally long-winded way of saying we're trying to hold absentee landlords and property owners accountable. I think everybody probably has experienced vacancy in their neighborhood. We know that often one problem property can disrupt a whole block. So this proposition says, hey, voters, we want to remove the cap, that $500 cap, and then we want to let the Board of Aldermen authorize a new set of fines and fees that would better fit the current vacancies. That does not mean that this does not set a new set of fines. It does not, there's no dollar amount associated. It does not do any of that. It says, hey, we've got this outdated number in the charter. We can't change it without the people. We want to take out that cap. I want to authorize the board to write some new laws that better address this issue. Because at this point, about 23% of all buildings are vacant in the city. So obviously that's a big number. So I had a presentation. It was actually pretty short. I know that Kelly asked for a 15-minute presentation. I was like, I don't know if I can really get it for 15 minutes. It's basically, those are really the two things. I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to answer questions. Alderman Browning and I were talking, and this came about because we heard testimony during the charter commission that a lawyer that works with legal services, that's something that he suggested, again, so that we could better address it with the city. I'm not always a fan of sticks. We have a lot of carrots. We're doing a lot, I think, in the city to address vacancy. We have the Vacancy Collaborative, which fully supports this initiative. We're doing all this effort, across the city, and you've seen some of the things that we're doing, the railway exchange, with the administration, the mayor's administration is doing some of the buildings downtown. This is not related, but it's just to say that
I think the issue of vacant buildings and how we address it is, it's important to me, and I think it's important to a lot of the people who live here, and we're trying to do it across the city, so this is just one way to continue to address it. So with that, I'll open up for questions, and then I'm happy to talk about Proposition B or Proposition S, if folks want to hear about that.
Rick, just super quickly, it looks like maybe two aldermen or people did not support this. I would just be curious what their debate was, why they would not support it.
Sure, so some of the folks during the conversation really focused on LRA properties, and the two folks who decided not to didn't vote yes on anything related to charter commission recommendations. Now, this technically was not an official charter commission recommendation. It was on there. We should look at this later on. And I said, hey, we should do it now because it's still a long process, right? So that was it. There was some pushback on, hey, the city needs to take care of these other properties. And I said, yes, and we can still do something about this now. This has been on the ballot before. I'm giving you kind of the extended play. It has failed on the ballot. I will say that I believe it will pass this time, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. One, I think the appetite is there to address it. When I talked about all these different areas, these different things going on to address vacancy. I was telling some folks that the realtors actually paid for some polling, and when they polled it, 67% of people who didn't know much about it supported it immediately. Once they heard more about it, it went to 85%. The ballot language this time is written very differently than the other versions. This one is not 2 sentences. The other ones are very long. So I feel kind of, with all those things, that those are good reasons why. So, and I wasn't around for that. So I'm of the mind that if we should try, even if we fail before, we should try again. You're welcome. That was a great question.
Now, I agree with you that the vacancies are about 23% of the city buildings. So what do we do now regarding vacancies?
I think it depends where you are, who you are, and what the issue is. So it depends what kind of it depends who owns the building. It depends why it's vacant, right? So sometimes buildings are vacant because the owner is completely derelict, right? They've kind of given up on the property. Sometimes they're vacant because they're in the process of being sold. Sometimes, we've been seeing, we've had a couple of instances where, or a lot of instances, particularly with this, that we'll have people speculating, and this is really what this is trying to address. So a lot of either corporate owners or out-of-state owners or even out-of-city owners are just saying, well, hey, we think that the value on this building is just going to go up. We're not living here, right? So we're just going to wait for the value to go up. And it's cheaper for them often to pay the $500 fine than actually pay what it would cost to fix it. So that's what we're seeing a lot of. Now there are, of course, there's a range. There's some properties that are, LRA properties, right? There's some of those that are vacant that are owned by the city, right? So there's a mix. So it really depends on, it could be a multitude of reasons of why they're vacant.
Okay.
So there's not one reason why a property is
Okay,
vacant.
if I may just ask another question. So what are we gonna do if we change to your position? How is that gonna affect, how is that gonna affect the building? You might get the person to pay more money, but how is that gonna affect the vacant buildings?
Well, it's not gonna fix all of them in one swoop, right? What we are hoping it will do is that so it's gonna do 2 things. One, we have to still write the laws, right? So this proposition, once it passes, we still have to write the laws to change the fees.
Okay.
So this basically says we can charge more and the board can do it, and then we still have to go write the laws. So that's step one. So this is step one. Step two is writing those laws. I think what I'm hearing and what we'd like to do is really go after some of the bigger consistent bad actors, like kind of the Paul McKees of the world, if you will, who are more speculators, right? And turn and move some of those properties and get people, incentivize people to develop them instead of sitting on them.
I was gonna try to add to that. So there's a number of things that can happen. So maybe they're not paying their taxes, or maybe they are paying their taxes. Now there's liens that are on the property with bigger amounts of money. The city can then go ahead and put that on the courthouse steps. They can actually accelerate it. They don't have to wait 3 years, which is generally what they do. They can sell it, and if you have a developer, then they can get it in the hands of the developer rather than waiting the 3 years. Nobody wants it. It's been fallen into itself, and then it goes to LRA, and then nothing can really happen with it unless the developer is willing to put in all that money.
So what changes? What changes?
It puts more liens on it, more money that people have to pay. So there's a lien on the property then for those outstanding costs of this additional fee. So rather than $500, they'll put $1,000.
So they'll either sell the property, and that's the goal, either sell the property instead of saying, I'm gonna wait because this is gonna accrue and they're low. We've got, I'm sure you've seen like people waiting for them for 10 years because they think they're gonna get more money. They're gonna sell to somebody who's gonna invest in it so people can live in it or businesses can occupy it. So that's the goal. And again, this isn't a one size fits all for every property because properties are vacant for different reasons and there are different mechanisms behind it. So the idea is that for a lot of these properties that are just, people are sitting or companies are sitting on them, not doing anything because it's cheaper and easier for them to pay a $500 fine than to pay $10,000 to fix the building. We want to push them to either fix it or sell it to somebody who's gonna fix it so it's not a problem.
So are you basically saying, the only way y'all gonna force them to, I guess, speed up the process is by giving them more money? I mean, making their fines bigger? That's the only way?
Well, no, this is one thing. So this proposition, so this is like step one. So this is what's on the ballot is the cap for fees is $500, and that's in the charter. So what this is asking voters to do is to remove the cap for only vacant and things related to vacant and deteriorated non-owner occupied properties. And that's important because it's not for people who may have deteriorating property and their homeowner who may not be able to afford properties and it's taking and it might be slower to fix. It's not for these, it's not related to that. It would be for, sometimes we hear about, I know that there was one area where there was there's like 4 buildings that were demolished without a permit, right? It'd be like, you could apply a different ordinance and they would have higher fines for something like that. So this is just one area. There are lots of other programs and other things related to development, different sorts of incentives. So this doesn't take away any of the positive things that are going on. This is addressing like a systematic problem that we're seeing. I see you have, I feel like.
No, I'm just saying, not to take a shot at you, but I can see why this failed because it's not confusing all together. To me, from my point of view, it's like you're, I guess, pump faking, trying to scare these big businesses. Oh, we're going to force you to pay more money. It's not going to stop them before. Stop them now. Like I said, more money is not going to stop them. They're going to find other loopholes to get over. So I guess from my point of view, I feel like it's failing because you're not really forcing them to hold their hand.
Well, I think it's starting to, right? I mean, it's a part of it.
But this is like only one step. Like, she's not even saying that like making them pay more money is the only option that's gonna come from it, but the town is not allowing them to even take advantage of other opportunities to push them out or like sell it or make it better, basically. Because the way it's in the charter, they can't do anything beyond the 5, like, it's.
Yeah, we can't even write another law.
Yeah.
We can't even do anything past it. That's why this is the first step, is removing it and authorizing the board to write new laws. This isn't the new law. There'll be a whole other legislative process, and I think a great transform 314 idea would be, there are best practices in other cities that do it, that have higher penalties, that it's not okay to demo something and benefit off of it. And again, this isn't the only, you're hearing about one particular piece related to vacancy. I wish there's maybe some other people are more knowledgeable of what's going on in that space. There are tons of other things happening in that space. Like, CDA's got a ton of things going on. So this is one particular piece, but it's not the only thing that's happening.
I just wanted to flag that the $500 cap was put in place in the 80s.
70s,
The
1970s.
70s, yeah. And so like when they put that cap in place, the idea was that it would have a higher penalty or dissuade people from speculating. And if you think about it, like when they wrote the legislation for the land bank back in like the 60s to start taking in properties that were abandoned, they set it up in a way that kind of preyed on people. Where if you couldn't pay your taxes, the land bank would take it. And that set us up for after the Great Recession, 2008, people couldn't pay their taxes. They didn't have a mechanism to help people stay in their homes. We had a lot of properties. And then people would just buy these up and do nothing and just sit on them, hoping that, because they would pay a few $100s each property, and it makes sense just. But that's terrible for the community, for the neighbors who live around it. And so being able to raise the fee that we can charge them will oftentimes make it not worth it for them to watch the property.
I think also the communities, it's not down, it's the cost of doing business for these speculators.
So I was just wondering, kind of this, on this line, like, is there any conversation even about when it comes to our abandoned and dilapidated schools? Like, I don't know if there's some thoughts on that too, just because, like, yeah, I know, like, if it still owns them or whatever. And case in point, the school couples, elementary school, already in YouTube. I am the youth minister at Redmond Farm, and we have been trying to get it for the past 20 years, for real, and just opposition, first it was a person at the time, but then now it was really that PS thing, and then I remember that maybe this was probably 9, maybe 10 years ago, because we were still trying to get it to the and we finally went in, and we just saw it was destroyed, flooded, windows cracked out, mold, and it's just like, it was really heartbreaking, just because that's my neighborhood. I work in that neighborhood. I had couples once you but I remember couples. And so I was wondering, like, are there any conversations about that as well when it comes to these abandoned schools, or even thoughts about it, what they were outside of developers buying them and turning into
Somebody's buying.
or people sitting on it too, because like people are sitting on properties. There's a street that is completely empty on Albion. Inside of Street Wolves, completely empty. Now, before that, there were the whole street was filled with abandoned 4-family flats, and it was owned by prominent people when I looked it up. So I'm just wondering, like, people are sitting on these different.
So I'm gonna go off script here from the proposition, because this is very specific, right? And we got some pushback because the initial one was to remove the cap altogether and not have a narrow and tailored, and we did. And that was why I just removing the cap, right? So that's that. What I'm gonna just tell you is, like, Daniela is, a older person, is that for us, being in this space is, I mentioned that 23% of the buildings in our city are vacant. We have one of the highest vacancy rates in the country. And I think that we're having all these conversations about growth, right? And it's my feeling that to grow and to talk about all these things about economic growth, we kind of have to see ourselves as like who we are before we can grow, which means addressing the issues that we have. So vacancy is a real problem. I mean, for the schools, I mean, I'm not even gonna touch the school district. So I think you're right. I mean, so how do we?
Unfortunately, you see more is property on North of Belmar.
It is.
Like, and I mean, you definitely see prominent North of Belmar. Of course, yes, South of Belmar, you can see whatever, but I'm talking about whole neighborhoods, whole streets. I'm talking about.
No, and if you look at-
Schools now, I'm talking about,
If
you
you,
know, I said vacant properties and stuff.
yeah, and I forgot, I don't know if it's CD or the Vacancy Collaborative, they have a map, and I'm telling you stuff you know from driving, you don't need to see a map. I mean, overwhelmingly, right, and to your question about, initially about why other alders didn't, I mean, personally, I was a little shocked, because some of, the real issue with vacancy is on the north side. That's where most of the vacant properties are. And that's why I think it's important. I mean, I think that we need some carrots, but I think we need to have some sticks too, and like force some movement into places. So I don't have an answer for you in the sense that we shouldn't. We do need to talk about it. We need to talk about how we creatively either move people into different spaces, or how we creatively, use our community of less people in a bigger space, right?
Real quick, I want to plug, and then I see it's a couple hands. I do want to plug, and Alderwoman Velazquez mentioned this, there is a whole St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative. So if people are really interested in being more engaged about developing a plan and what that looks like from a comprehensive standpoint, definitely check them out. I went to an event of theirs a month or 2 months, however long ago it was, and they're revamping some things. They have different committees. I'm not aware of all the committees, but they're really doing some great work in partnerships with folks from different sectors and different spaces and places in the community. So I'll be sure to share some information. Go on their website, St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative. They have a newsletter. Definitely make sure you sign up for that if you're interested in learning more, because there's a lot of different moving parts to this. And as the Alderwoman said, this is just one piece to that. So I really want to reiterate that when we're talking about Prop T, for instance, as well, these are just it's just one piece to the puzzle of all of the bigger issues, because these are some big issues. So this is just one piece. This is one tool, and something we talked about before, even talking about complete streets, right? That's not going to solve all the problems and addressing our unsafe and jacked up roads. It's not. But it is one of the tools in the toolbox that we can use to apply. And then there'll be other pieces of that we can layer on to make sure that we can fully address the problem. So St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative, everybody get into it, sign up for the newsletter. Okay? And we had a couple hands. I'm gonna go over here, and then I'm gonna go for the scribe. So go on.
I was brought up, and we always talk about the schools, it's older people. It's strictly, and I know what you just said. But do you raise the issue to your older people about, these buildings falling down, broken glass, bridges. I was on Avenue Bridge on west towards Grand Central. This was the Farmers High School. There, it was all boards up. These schools, I don't understand. The St. Louis public, I guess, still owns them.
So this is the parking lot.
Yes.
It's on the parking lot. Brothers and Rob. It's on the parking lot. It's on the parking lot. I know.
You kind of already answered my question. You had mentioned the vacancy collaborative twice now. But yeah, I just signed up for the newsletter, and just to throw this out, I work at Better Family Life, which is a school that was renovated and, through fundraising and nonprofit, it's now a viable, cultural community center. So it can be done, but, it definitely took a decade's worth of private investment and fundraising, and even now, it's always, a scramble to keep those type of things open. So I've seen what the Urban League has done, maybe they got that Commerce Bank over there on Natural Bridge. So I just think more projects like that, or people that have been able to effectively bring some of those things to life, just investing and figuring out what that looks like, I guess, and recreating that. I would just throw it out there since I heard that interest being generated.
And I would say this is again, Danielle, off of Proposition B, and Alderman Browning and I have talked about this. It's something I've been working on in my ward, and just trying to figure out how to get ideas how to apply it citywide. But I mean, we need to figure out how to do development in a way that we need to figure out how to do development better in the city. And that doesn't mean giving carte blanche or saying developers can do whatever they want. I think what we need is a predictable community engagement process and some predictability for both community and developers, right? You can't ask people to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars and they don't know if there's an outcome. And we also can't expect, we also can't expect communities to just say, hey, we're gonna build this thing in your neighborhood and you don't get a say in it, right? So I think that there's a lot of, we need to do better. And I think that that's part of it. So that's part of my soapbox.
Any other Prop B questions?
Okay, so present time, what's the city's perspective on this? What can they cause to come about? Or, you see, what can the city at the present time
On Prop B?
do, at present, where it is now? What can the city do
For development?
for the vacancies?
This is one of them. Giving the city, being able to better enforce with some more teeth is one way. There are other things. One of the things that we've seen is that, SLDC partially gives grant money to Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, and they work on, they file lawsuits for some of these properties, for some of these problematic property owners all across the city. That's another way and that is a very effective method. I'm not an attorney, so I cannot tell you the specific mechanisms behind it, but that's another way. So I'd say doing things like this, I think you've heard probably that staffing different departments, enforcement. I think enforcement is a big key, and this is another tool for enforcement.
Just a comment. I appreciate all this happening. These things didn't happen overnight. They've been deteriorating for decades. So we gotta somehow stop the bleeding and move forward. It can be decades before we see the change that we want. That's right.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Another comment, I was recently in Columbus, Ohio, and they had some blight and some vacancies as well. But, it's something to be studied. They were able to kind of link up with the artist community, and not only were they able to kind of board up some of those properties, they added some artistic value to it by adding art that was, important to their neighborhood. So I kind of feel like that's maybe what he was asking about, like how do we board it up or how do we get something going in the meantime? So I just noticed that in Columbus, Ohio, I know we have a vibrant art community in St. Louis. So, maybe thinking about something, not you, but just thinking about a program where we can get the arts community to pour into that, so just throwing it in there, just,
I follow the vacancy collaborative, and I just want to emphasize how complex vacancy is and how many different avenues. One of the greatest programs that has come out of the vacancy collaborative is what is called the RETAP program, which is the Real Estate Tax Assistance Fund. So, if you are a homeowner, you live in your property, you're struggling with your property taxes, the city will help you to pay off your arrears because we as a city have determined that it is more valuable to keep people in their homes than to let them go into the land bank. And so for Vacancy Collaborative, that's one of their programs is, this RETAP program to keep people in their homes, to keep these neighborhoods occupied. This is another, prong in terms of them trying to address specific types of vacancy. So like.
Healthy home repair is another one,
Yeah, the
right?
Healthy Home Repair Program, that helps people do like really basic, home repair programs. They have a lot of contractors who volunteer to like replace your front steps or like help fix the foundation problem or touch pointing or like, maybe a roof problem. And there's a long, waiting list for some of those, and like we're trying to beat up the funding. But the way that we address vacancy happens in a lot of different avenues because it's easy to think that the city owns all these vacant homes, but that's not true. Like the LRA owns a very small percentage of the vacant homes in the city. The rest of them are private property owners. And this is a way to help us kind of target the people who have intentions towards our city, who are not invested in trying to make it better. We're not going after people who, that are living in their homes. It's not, it's not even a lot of times on the north side, you see homes that have been passed down through generations in the family and they may not live there anymore. We're not going after those people. And we're going after people who have been predatory.
And I would just say before I hop over here, is that just generally too, I mean, I think it's a big, small change or a small, big change. But you also, and especially in the history of St. Louis, right? We've heard about eminent domain. We've also heard how these things have been inequitably applied, targeted communities, right? And I believe, you don't want it to be easy for the government to take away your property, right? And so when she talks about like private property, I mean, some of these things are complex because it is private property. And in my mind, you don't want it to be easy. You just don't. So.
Oh, I just had a comment. So I actually work at Park Central Development and we facilitate the RETAP program. So I'm the person that does that. So if you guys have any questions about that, it's run by me and my other coworker. So if anybody has anybody in their community that they think needs more information about that, I can definitely give you the information. But again, it's Park Central Development. And if you call us, we have a whole line about it. I work there and we facilitate the program, and we'd love to we work with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri and the Vacancy Lab to flyer and different things, especially when it's RETAP season, because that's normally the summer months with the tax sale is when we target people the most. But if you have anyone in your community that needs more information, I'd be more than happy to help with that.
It is.
Thank you.
Which is interesting. So. Are you gonna stay up here with us?
Yeah.
We have another mic.
She said it's enough.
Right, I know, and so,
Valid.
I know, I hate, like, we have our tech difficulties because, propositions be in us, and it's like, wait, what are you trying to do?
I feel like we're. Is this on? Is this on?
Yeah.
Is this on now? I feel like we're about to do like a duet or like. Sitcom over here.
So first off, thank you again for providing your gems and the handout. And also, planting the seeds because vacancy is such a pervasive problem in our city. So thank you for, dipping your toes in the pond. So thank you for that. We also looked it up that there are 2 additional propositions that city voters will be weighing in on that, again, also, if we approve them, will change our city's chart. So this stuff is really important. So again, it's 2 propositions. Prop B, as in boy, which I know we talked about earlier, and Prop S. So do you want to take away? We kind of talked about Prop B already. So are folks cool with that? Do we need to revisit that?
It's just like what it is because I was hearing B and they were saying B and
Oh,
it sounds
B?
very similar. So
B is in boy.
For budget. B is for budget.
Thank you.
Yeah.
B is for budget.
And B is for vacancy.
And V is for
B is
vacancy.
in Victor, is in vacancy, yes.
And T is for transportation.
Budget.
Did we let you in on a little secret? Short-term
Short-term
rental. They did like a figure letters. They did. The BOE let us figure letters.
We were gonna have the whole alphabet, so I was like, oh.
No, it's okay. Well, we were calling it the alpha ballot because there's so many letters, but there's not actually 26 of them, although the ballot is pretty, it's still.
So B, proposition B for budget. So are we good? We already talked about that a little bit as far as it would give more power to our Board of Aldermen to.
Can I just add a little bit? I just want to say, we are the outliers. Most legislative bodies have the ability to add and subtract.
Yes.
So same, I know there's some pushback, despite what you may be hearing. The state legislature can add and subtract and keep their budget balanced. Big cities like Kansas City, cities like Chicago, most major cities and their city council can add and subtract and get their budgets in on time. I am confident that we can do that. So you may be hearing otherwise, but the way St. Louis does it is most legislative bodies do not do it like you do.
So real quick, for people that may not be aware currently, because I know I call it the dance. I call it the dance, right? Like between the Board of Aldermen and the Board of ENA and the Board of Aldermen. Like, so what is that giving currently right now? So can y'all speak to that a little bit, what that process is and that, I call it the dance.
It's a dance. I feel like maybe it's more of like a boxing.
I mean, y'all are,
I
yeah,
mean, I feel like it's.
yeah,
like
that's
a-
y'all's world. So if you could speak to that a little bit.
ENA cooks it, they give it to us, we can take away from it if we want, and if it's sent back to them, they usually put it right back in. So basically ENA is the chef here, and we are basically just.
We get to add some spices maybe.
We don't get to add anything, I mean, we can't. That's the problem.
Well, we can add in a negotiated way, I would say. Like this past year, I'm on the budget committee. You're on a budget committee. I was on budget committee for the first time. Alderman Aldrich had a proposal to, he wanted to add, the circuit attorney had requested a bigger budget. He had requested that we move, so he subtracted some money from somewhere else, which essentially would be adding.
He recommended.
He recommended, but it was a subtraction, but it was an addition, right? But to add, that would, at the bottom line, it would add money to somewhere else by subtracting it from somewhere else. So ENA basically agreed to that. They moved where the money came from, but it was a negotiation, right? It wasn't an actual, we had to subtract it to add it somewhere else. So the real power, as Alderman Browning said, it lies with ENA. So we do this a dance, or maybe like I'm not a boxer, so maybe it's like a.
What does ENA stand for?
The Board of Estimate and Apportionment. So that is, that's probably a conversation for another day, but it's, the mayor, the president of the Board of Aldermen, and the comptroller. Each of those offices comprises the estimate, the Board of ENA, and then they ultimately have budgeting approval. So they are the chefs. We can subtract things, kind of negotiate changes, and ultimately we approve it. The full board approves it through a bill. And then that's how the budget gets approved. But they really present the budget. The budget director really lives with the administration, the mayoral administration. And I don't know the numbers, but most cities also do not have a board of ENA at this point. So
Next year.
But I just think it's important for people to know that there's a lot of conversation about not working. Most governments do not do that, do not run like we do. Most councils, state legislatures can do this. It is not something controversial in most places. It's being made controversial here for reasons I don't know why. It works most places, generally most of the time.
And For a number of years, the Board of Alderman didn't even pass. it. We got a budget.
Just to give you like the idea of Board of DNA, it came out of like the progressive movement, and by progressive movement, I mean like the early 1900s, where they wanted to like concentrate power with people who were college educated essentially. And it was meant to like, balance out the power of the different offices. They tried to pass a constitutional amendment for the United States in like 1873 or something to do this, and everyone was like, this is terrible. And like, we were one of the few cities that were like, we're gonna try this out.
And stick with it.
There we go. Just like the try. However, there is the opportunity, if you all feel strongly about this, clearly transform, we are not endorsing or supporting anything. If people feel very strongly or whatever, or against any of these propositions, obviously, you have the power on November 5th to weigh in on that.
I was gonna say, it's just like you don't vote for the president, they don't trust the alderman, so you have to be an aide. That's what it is.
So, S.
Oh, yeah. Any other questions about the budget? I think we got that about the coin. You good? Okay, so we got it.
It's ready for us?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not gonna go super deep on this because this is not, B is kind of my baby. But probably, well, yes, B is baby. It's also weird if anybody's seen the boys have property, that's a whole other conversation. I know, it's not bad. So, okay, back to sort of our civics 101 over here. So last year, the Board of Aldermen passed, some regulations for short-term rentals. So, Airbnb, VRBO, those go into effect in November. I'm gonna do my little like dance over here. So government, we have regulation, that's what we passed last year, which will go into effect this year. And now we're asking for taxation. So Prop S is the taxation portion of this. So it is asking the voters to approve essentially a 3% use tax for short-term rentals. That's not on you, that's for the people who use it. So it's 3% per night per room. So there's like a math, there's some math on how they calculate it. And then, so the half of that will go to the Affordable Housing Trust, and the other 50% would go to housing related things such as the impacted tenants. So I think the thought process behind that is that we know that in the kind of spectrum of housing and housing related issues, why short-term rentals can be an economic boost, they've also affected our housing market, and also I would say that there's data and statistics and experience that they've raised housing prices. And so I think the idea is to, one, keep funding our Affordable Housing Trust, and then also fund some of these other funds to support housing in the city.
I just want to speak in support of the regulations that you guys have passed regarding Airbnbs. My apartment currently was an Airbnb, and the only reason why my landlord put it on the market as an apartment is because of the changes coming in November. And so I just want to applaud the work that you guys have done, because it's one more apartment that I was able to rent, which gives more units means that there's more supply, which keeps the prices down. And that's one of the really great things about St. Louis is the affordability among all of these other amenities. So I just wanted to applaud.
Well, thank you, and I was shouting out, I know Alderman Browning did a lot of work on that bill, so thank you.
That's exactly right. You know your house.
That's it.
What was the regulation that happened before this?
So we passed Board Bill 33 and 34. So there were no, up until last year, there were no regulations. It was like the Wild West, short-term rentals.
Like the city didn't, sorry, not to cut you
No,
off.
we're here.
The city didn't even know like who the operators were, how many there were. Like there was, I mean, think about that for a second. There was no way for folks to really fully get a sense of like the short-term rentals, the Airbnbs and the like, of like who was even operating.
how many there were?
Yeah, where
Some are being taxed differently,
Yeah.
some are being taxed at different rates.
So part of this helps, the legislation that the Alderwoman is speaking to, that part of that regulation also included, is it like a list or something,
So
or
there's a
a
permitting,
registry?
there's a registry, there's a, you can probably speak, I mean, there's,
This is, yeah, the first is registry, so we still don't know. So if you're wondering, okay, why is my neighbor different every week? Like maybe it's a short-term rental, but once it's going to affect, people will have to get a permit. So.
which will include a building inspection, correct?
Yes, to make sure it's in good condition as well. So they'll have to get a permit. An individual owner will be limited to 4 permits, so no longer will people have hundreds or even dozens of ones that they're not actually paying attention to and not keeping track of.
And they'll have to have somebody here locally.
They'll have to be within an hour's drive, yes. So, you have to have an agent, you know, you could own it, you could live in Denver and own one, but you have to have a registered agent within an hour's drive of that unit in order to make sure that they can respond, to anything, because the police were tired of, you know, trying to figure out who owns this and then calling someone saying as a raging party, we're being shot at your property, and then the owner doesn't pick up and they live in Denver. So, yeah, we have, some good regulations. So a cap, we included, my favorite thing, that I got inserted. I'm really proud of this. You've ever heard the term ghost hotel? So it's like a large building and tons of the units are Airbnb units. And so like you live in the building, but it kind of feels like none of your neighbors actually live there. So we put a cap. It's not only can a single owner not have more than 4, but a certain percentage of the building cannot be Airbnb. So we put like a 50% cap in for 4 units. You know, if you live in a 4-unit building, no more than 2 units can be used as an Airbnb by that owner. And that's just to prevent you from having to live with a bunch of strangers and having people site around. I don't know if you all know this, but it's a security nightmare to use a building as an Airbnb because you were giving out the code to a large building with just anyone. And any good landlord will not do it in their apartments. So you can guess the landlords that will. So it's been leading some really big problems in our city, and we're really excited for the regulations to go into effect because it will not only put more housing in the market, really excited to hear that, you know, your landlord decided to go back to long-term rentals. I've heard of other landlords doing that too, out of business because it doesn't make sense for me anymore. And that's the point, is that our homes should be for our residents. We don't mind tourism, but we don't want the majority of our housing to end up being for tourists. So we have hotels. The other thing to mention about Prop S is that even with this extra tax, hotels will still pay more taxes. So we're not taxing people out of the business either. Like, if you want to run a hotel, you can run a hotel, you can pay higher taxes, but you can run it. But this will still be less than what hotels pay. So we're just trying to create some parity here and try to get that money routed towards, you know, providing more housing.
And see, we do teamwork here, which is why we can pass a budget with addition and subtraction.
We need multiplication.
No, we're not doing that. Today.
Maybe your day.
You have. Well, thank you. Clap up, please. For our folks, our members of the Alderman for being able to spend some time with us to share some nuggets. I didn't want to lift up that, I know we had a conversation here about all of these propositions. There is an entire event on, I believe it's on the 14th. Is that correct? Yes.
October 14th, we're going to be doing a call on all of these things. If you really want to hear more or just see other people's reactions to them, it'll be on October 14th, 6 p.m. at Grace and Peace Fellowship. That's 5574.
Give an address and date again, please.
So it's Monday, October 14th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Grace and Peace Fellowship. And that's located at 5574 Delmar, 63112.
It's also going to be live streamed on STL TV, so if you can watch it.
Okay, nice. That's good. Shout out to STL.
They record it.
Correct. Maybe it's working.
So it'll be.
That's good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to throw this out there. I know about ghost hotels, bro. I didn't know this was the quality, but my guy stays in one of them, and his key code changed like 2 or 3 months ago. It was a regular, you dial him, and then it changed to the Airbnb code, and now you gotta call in on your own personal phone. His phone be there, he be on call, but under like 5-10 minutes, what happened? Was that, why did they change your key code? It's only because they served you.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, Airbnb people. And then now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it's always floors of people. It's very influenced, nice building in this South City. So, yeah, thank you for that. That's why.
That is too much.
But
hopefully that's gonna be done.
so, geez Louise. Okay, so quick shift. I'm also recognizing the time here. I'm not gonna keep you past our 8 p.m. curfew.
But we have breakfast. just in case.
So, I want to plant the seeds again. We'll be spending, time next month about like what we're gonna be advocating for or on in 2025. So we're gonna spend pretty much most of our time next month doing that, not for a full 2 hours, I promise, because ain't nobody trying to do that, especially after we get off work. We're not doing that. Kellyanne, we ain't doing it. However, we do need to kind of focus on, again, specifically what are some issues that what are we gonna be championing in 2025? So I wanted to take a couple of steps back to think about what we've covered so far. In 2024, when we covered ground this year. We met every month this year, y'all. Woo, that's wild. So this is what we covered, and again, we'll talk about this next month too, but this is what we covered. We talked about the City of St. Louis governmental structure and its funding related to addressing streets. We talked about that. Yeah, and shout out to Alderman Browning Caitlin, with that. She came with that graphic that she worked on, so that really brought it home for folks as far as just like the mess that we are navigating, which is why we're unfortunately in the predicament that we are when it comes to our, as I call them, our jacked up and unsafe streets. So we had some conversations about that, and we talked about complete streets. We didn't talk about nothing else. We talked about complete streets, like 5 meetings dedicated to mentioning that topic. So that was something we really talked about. We discussed again what was currently on the book. We had Smart Growth America, Dustin, shout out to him. He came from DC to talk about like what the policy means, why it's important, how it looks like in different cities, and how we can champion that in the city of St. Louis. We had Alderwoman Schweitzer, who was champion alongside, obviously, Alderman Browning. So they came to speak to us as well about how important this updating that policy was and is. And the city did it. The city updated its complete streets policy, gas. So we talked about that this year. And I think also I want to lift up when we're talking about advocacy, because we had folks in the room, again, that were penning, right? And drafting and crafting this legislation. So the fact that we were able to dialogue and have those conversations, I think it made a difference. So again, we were doing the work. But we were doing the work and having to say and influencing how our city really makes sure that we have these safe streets. Also, man, I'm looking at this list. We provided updates and ways for folks to engage in current efforts that are looking to improve some aspects of our city's jacked up and unsafe infrastructure. We heard from a lot of folks in different, because again, I know people give me the side eye when people ask me, what's going on in the city? What are these projects that are? There's stuff happening. Do we want it to speed up and we want it to happen now? Yeah. Is it gonna happen tomorrow? No. Change takes time. So there are a lot of different things happening. So we shed some light on some of those things and ways that people can be engaged to be included in those projects. So we talked about the strategic land use plan. We had them awesome conversation and dialogue. Again, ways for folks to stay engaged in that process. We also have folks come to speak to the transportation and mobility plan, and also, again, ways to stay engaged, right, in that process. The ARPA funded projects, we talked about that, and also ways to engage and stay involved in those projects, right? The Safe Streets for All Regional Safety Action Plan. I don't even know if a lot of people even knew that our region has developed a safety action plan, right? Encouraging. Obviously, the work will start in implementation, but it exists. So we lifted that up. And also the MetroLink Grant Line. That was our last conversation. Again, awareness of ways that people can stay engaged actively in that process. So those are some of the big things that we covered in 2024. Wow. And finally, for y'all. So basically what we're gonna do, and I just want to lift up real quick because I see the time. I don't want to keep y'all late. But I also want to lift up, I like to close the feedback loop when I ask people questions and have people give me information. I like to let y'all know that I'm just not checking a box or having you just fill out a silly sheet. But I actually really do. We actually utilize this information. So last time I asked y'all some questions, and y'all responded. So this is a super high level summary, right, of the information. I got that. So again, the questions were asked to really get a sense of like what Transform 314's capacity going to be when we start implementing some advocacy efforts, whatever that looks like in 2025, because we got to know what we're working with before we work it. So we learned at that time we had 17 folks, and I put an asterisk there because it's really more people. I didn't count myself. There was a couple other folks that weren't there that are always showing up, and some other community stakeholders that we are actively engaged with that didn't even contribute to that. So 17 folks, again, asterisks, that are ready to roll up their sleeves and contribute to doing the work and improving our streets. That's bad. Also, the 17 folks, man, we are talented as a collective. Different skill sets, different connections and networks. You know, people living in different parts and neighborhoods of the city. So again, we really have a nice range of collectivity here and diversity, which I think we can really leverage. And again, just looking at the 17 folks that completed this year's last time we were together. Also, I asked y'all, what resources did y'all need, right? To make sure that you are confident and effective advocates of change. A lot of people basically was like, yo, it ain't broke. So some of the things that we do, which is sharing those legislative updates, talking about the active projects that are going on that address our city's infrastructure, providing again various updates about different policies, especially when we're talking about a lot of these things with elections. People really rock with that. People really find that valuable. So clearly that ain't going nowhere. We're gonna keep doing that. But I do want to lift up a couple of items that were kind of adds, considering what we're currently doing. So one was provide a toolkit for advocates, which will also include social media posts. That's something to incorporate, and also providing a recap of the major points shared in our last meetup. So those are a couple things that we can incorporate in 2025 in our efforts. And then lastly, but certainly not least, again, because y'all are movers and shakers in this space. Y'all know people, y'all know things, y'all. So we have a plethora, okay, of outreach strategies and ways that we can continue to reach people and activate for change. You know, we got some folks that are skilled in communications. So people were talking about, hey, give me a one-pager, give me some talking points. And I can champion and transform when I'm at my neighborhood association meeting or when I'm in this community. I just need to talk points. So that was one idea. Also, just be seen, right? Pop up, roll up at the events, and engage with folks so people know that we are out here doing this work, partnering with other organizations. Also looking at maybe restructuring our meetup a little bit to incorporate some different activities. I think the suggestions was like incorporate yoga and some type of an arts or creative flow in there. So that was listed up to invite more folks in. Integrating arts into advocacy, which we have done a bit of that here or there. So I think that's definitely doable. Opportunities beyond community meetups to, again, invite more people because our meetups are on Wednesdays. Wednesdays are busy, it's a busy evening. So even if people are interested, maybe they're just not available. So maybe finding other opportunities outside of our meetups here to reach more people. And of course, attendance crowd. Like, so that's kind of what we're working with. I mentioned where we started, and then what are we gonna do with all this? Next steps next month. So we're gonna get into what our advocacy efforts, what they'll entail in 25 to improve the safety and conditions of our city streets. And so I'm gonna make a very conscious effort, because I always say, our jacked up streets, like it's so. I mean, it's the truth, but it's so negative. So I'm also trying to create that shift because we are looking to build and create a more connected, a safer, smoother, just like more thriving, more functional traffic infrastructure in our city. So I need to change my communications about that too. And so we'll kind of get into that. We'll unravel some of the whys, right? Like why are we currently like this? So we'll get to the why and also discuss, well, how can we counter that? What are some things that we can focus on in 2025 specifically? Because there's a lot of reasons why things are the way that they are. So what is our one thing or our two things or whatever that we're going to focus on and champion till the wheels fall off? Not literally, which I know what I mean, in 2025 to make sure we're able to get some change, see some meaningful change. So that is all that I have. For this evening, I'm gonna wait to see if anybody had any questions about what I just mentioned, where we've been, where we at, or where we're going. Thoughts?
I think, I agree that we did cover quite a bit. And it's always good to go back and rehash where we've been because, we have a, fellowship of people that some weren't here when we had it earlier. So that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stringfellow. And I know you mentioned that too. You was when I think the last time we met about making sure we revisited because we have quite a bit. So I appreciate that. Anything else? Any other thoughts?
Thank you. Glad to be here. This is my first time here.
Yay!
One of my first and one of my best friends in kindergarten, but also community partners. Thank you guys. Kindergarten. So in college, it's been a great asset with civic engagement over at State my young people. So yeah, thank you guys.
And speaking of, as we're working together, that can be also an extension of the work that we are doing here when we talk about, we need everybody, especially our young leaders. Thank you, Alan. I'm gonna be bugging you.
I'm here. I'm like,
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other? Go ahead.
This is Alderman Browning still here?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the significance of Missouri streets and city streets? Can you give us some comment on that? Because a lot of
State-owned streets and like city-owned streets, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, so, there are certain roads in the city that are not managed by the city. Those roads include Bradway, Shoto, Natural Bridge Avenue, I'm probably missing. Chippewa, part of Chippewa, and only part of Shoto, too, but, those are maintained by MoDOT. And, what's really exciting is that MoDOT is actually taking a lot more interest in maintaining these last couple of years, and so, if any of y'all know Jen Wade, she's fantastic. She has been focusing on how do we improve those streets to be more friendly with the city and not so much like highways. So we appreciate that. And then all the other streets are, except the highways, obviously, but all of the neighborhood streets, we call collectors, which are streets like, Tower Grove Avenue is a collector, and then we call arteries, which Forest Park Avenue would be what we call an artery. Those are city streets when we think of our city park. Thank you.
All right, well. It's been real, y'all. It's been real. Thank you for coming out. Yeah, be safe and we'll be in touch. Take care, y'all.
Bring it out, trunk or treat, bring it out, trunk or treat.
Trunk or treat, trunk or treat. Do, do, do. End stream.